Joining us now, President Trump's Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. Reince, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Hey, good morning, Chris.
President Trump reacted to the defeat of Repeal and Replace on Friday by blaming Democrats. Here he is.
We had no Democrat support. We had no votes from the Democrats. They weren't going to give us a single vote.
But Reince, the president never reached out to Democrats. You never offered Democrats a compromise, so how can you blame Democrats for this?
Well, I mean, look, Obamacare, as we know, is imploding, and it is exploding, and every other adjective you can provide, it's going south. And it would be nice to get some Democrats on board, but you're right. At the end of the day, I believe that it's time for the party to start governing, and I think that's important. I also think, though, that Democrats can come to the table as well, and if you look at what the president said in the Oval just after that comment, he said, you know, perhaps it's time for us to start talking to some moderate Democrats as well and come up with, you know, a bipartisan solution. I do think that there are Republicans this weekend, Chris, that are scrambling. I think there are people in the Freedom Caucus and the Tuesday group, and for those listeners, that's the moderate group, that are starting to talk about what the next steps are in order to prevent an implosion of Obamacare. But the president's also said that when Obamacare does ultimately explode, which it will, we are going to be prepared to lead again, and if Democrats come on board with a plan down the road, we'll welcome that.
Okay, I want to talk about that in a second, but the president, I don't know if you even know this, has been tweeting this morning, and I want to put up a tweet. I see the look in your eye.
No, I've seen
you do know this one. He said this morning, Democrats are smiling in D.C. that the Freedom Caucus, with the help of Club for Growth and Heritage, two conservative think tanks, have saved Planned Parenthood and Obamacare. So he seems to be putting it right on the right wing, the hardline conservatives in your own party.
Well, I think the president's 100% correct, and he hits the bullseye in that tweet like he often does. We can't be chasing the perfect all the time. I mean, sometimes you have to take the good and put it in your pocket and take the win. And we have a two-party system in this country. You know, we're not Italy. We don't have 12 different parties where you have the super conservatives, the kind of conservatives, the moderates, and everyone else in between, and everyone fits nicely into one package. We have one party in the Republican Party and one in the Democrat Party. And the Republican Party came up with a package. The president met with over 120 members of the House. There was more love shown to outside groups by this White House, whether it was Vice President Pence, Mick Mulvaney, Tom Price, Steve Bannon, myself, Mark Short. I mean, the point is, the diverse group of people working the halls of Congress, including the leadership in Congress, I think it's time for our folks to come together. And I also think it's time to potentially get a few moderate Democrats on board as well.
I'm going to get to the Democrats in a second, but I want to talk about this issue about Obamacare, because the president and you this morning have said that Obamacare is on its last legs. Here's the president on Friday.
Sure.
I've been saying for the last year and a half that the best thing we can do, politically speaking, is let Obamacare explode. It is exploding right now.
But Mr. Trump has also said he doesn't want to hurt the millions of people who depend on Obamacare right now. So the question is, will he do something, as you have problems with Obamacare, will he do things to prop it up, to stabilize it in the meantime, or is he just going to let it explode?
Well, it's going to be a decision down the line, mainly driven by acts of Congress, as you know. I mean, there's funding issues coming up soon, I believe, in the next couple months in regard to
But you could do things
Obamacare.
You could do things to try to protect those people.
And it's a possibility, Chris. I don't think the president's closing the door on anything in regard to the issue of health care. But if you look at this bill and you look at what it provided, I mean, the tax relief, the largest entitlement reform in modern history. You look at the fact that we were almost to the point where we would be defunding Planned Parenthood, or we were to the point where we would be defunding Planned Parenthood. The fact that some of these members took that and decided not to move forward with it, I think is a real shame, and I think the president's disappointed in a number of people that he thought were loyal to him that weren't. That all being said, I want people out there to understand that this president is not going to be a partisan president. This is a president that wants to provide, and you're right, he wants to make sure that people don't get left behind. You want to make sure that there's competition in the marketplace so that rates are lower and people can choose their doctor. So if those three things are incompatible with some members of the Republican House, then it's going to be incompatible, and then we need to work with moderate Democrats to make sure that that happens. We will leave no one behind. We want to make sure that people are covered, they pick their doctor, and they pay less, and we enforce competition in the market.
Okay,
That's
so
what this, and by the way, that's what this bill provided.
I want to get to that because this is like the third time now in our brief conversation that you've talked about reaching out to Democrats. Is the lesson the president is taking away from this defeat that he's got to change his legislative strategy, that you don't have a governing majority in the House, that the Freedom Caucus never seems to get to yes, and that he's got to be more of a bipartisan president and reach out to Democrats and try to pick up some votes because you can't count on Republicans to give you the majority?
Well, I don't know if he agrees with everything you just said, but what I do think is that everything's on the table. We'll give these guys another chance, and that's not really the point. If we can come up with a bill that accomplishes the goals of the president with Republicans alone, then we'll take it and we'll move forward with it. But we're moving on to tax reform. We've got the budget coming up. I think it's more or less a warning shot that we are willing to talk to anyone. We always have been, and I think more so now than ever, it's time for both parties to come together and get to real reforms in this country, whether it be taxes, whether it be health care, whether it be immigration, whether it be infrastructure. This president is ready to lead and sort of, over with the games in the legislature.
Okay. Yesterday morning, the president tweeted this, and I want to put it up. Watch Judge Jeanine on Fox News at 9 p.m. Now, we all love Judge Jeanine on Fox News.
I do love Judge Jeanine.
But we were curious as to why he would call her out. Here was the start of her show last night.
My opening statement. Paul Ryan needs to step down as Speaker of the House.
Does the president want Paul Ryan to resign as Speaker?
Well, first of all, I will go on record. We do love Judge Jeanine, and so does the president. I think it was more coincidental, Chris.
Come on.
I did not talk to the president about the tweet. I'm just telling you the truth. There was no pre-planning here. The president,
the president, but why would he say watch her and then that's the first thing out of her mouth?
Because he loves Judge Jeanine and he wanted to do Judge Jeanine a favor.
So does he want Paul Ryan to step down or
no?
No,
he doesn't. And he's talked to Paul Ryan yesterday for about an hour. He believes what he said in the Oval Office on Friday. He doesn't blame Paul Ryan. In fact, he thought Paul Ryan worked really hard. He enjoys his relationship with Paul Ryan, thinks that Paul Ryan's a great Speaker of the House. So None of that has changed. I think this is more of a personal relationship, the president helping out a friend.
And I assume the friend was Judge Jeanine, not Paul Ryan.
Well, both of them are. But as to the tweet,
but in terms of
as to the tweet, yes.
Okay. And now I want to pick up on somebody else.
Sure.
Here's what the New York Times reports today about the president's reaction to his defeat. I'm sure you've seen this morning. In a search for scapegoats, he, the president, asked his advisors repeatedly, whose fault was this? Increasingly, the blame has fallen on Reince Priebus, the White House chief of staff, who coordinated initial legislative strategy on the health care bill with Mr. Ryan. And there's a comment similar to that in the Washington Post today. So obviously people are saying it. Are you in trouble?
I'm not in any trouble. I've got a great relationship with the president. We talk all the time. In fact, just before coming on the set, he gave me a call. This is gossip hounds, and it's always going to happen. And I don't really care about it. I'm looking forward to accomplishing the president's agenda moving forward and working with anybody in the legislature to make sure that happens.
Okay, let's talk about some item moving forward, and that is tax reform, that which the president says is the next big thing that he's going to tackle. That's even more complicated than health care reform because it involves every industry, not just one industry, and you've also got a big split within the Republican Party because Speaker Ryan wants this border adjustment tax, which would tax imports, not exports, and there are a lot of Republicans who say, no way. So the question is the president having second thoughts after health care, on following the lead of Paul Ryan, particularly when it comes to the border adjustment tax and tax reform in general?
No, I don't. Not at all, Chris. I think that moving forward, the president's vision on lowering taxes for every American is what's going to unite not just the Republican Party, but I think some of those Democrats are going to come on board as well. If we can provide one of the biggest middle-class tax cuts in the history of this country, I think that's important. I think another point that's important to the president is potential for a border tax, that we start evening up the playing field between our country, countries around the world. He's not backing off of that. It's something that's very important to him. And if you go back and watch President Trump's interviews from the 1980s, the 1990s, early 2000s, and recent years, he has been talking about this agenda his entire life. And I think now more than ever, I actually think the president is even more emboldened to stick to his guns and his heart and the things and the convictions that he's laid out to the American people for decades.
Okay.
And he's not going to turn his back on his core principles. And I think his core principles have broad admiration in both parties.
Finally, and I want to do this quickly if we can, because we're running out of time. Let's turn to the House investigation of alleged links between Russia and the Trump campaign, and also the allegations that the Obama administration swept up surveillance and leaked it to try to undercut the Trump presidency. Let's do a lightning round here.
Okay.
Quick questions, quick
worked,
answers.
by the way.
I promise, these are going to be very easy.
Sure.
Does the president accept the conclusion from all sides that President Obama did not wiretap Trump Tower during the campaign, and is he ready to apologize?
Okay, well, first of all, the answer is no. But
no, he doesn't accept it.
No, and I don't accept it. I mean, the reality is that, number one, when people say Obama, I think it's very clear Obama administration is
I
what
understand.
it,
No,
what
but-
it means.
but
okay,
I'm
but number
not-
two,
I'm not
you
getting-
look at this headline. This is in the New York Times. It says wiretapped data. This is the New York Times. I think it's safe to say.
But that's nothing
Wait a
about
second.
Trump Tower.
You asked me a question. I think it's, well, people working in Trump Tower. I think it's safe to
it's
say.
nothing about Trump Tower. There were also surveillance of foreign
I think it's safe to
targets.
say that when people use the word wiretapped, they're not talking about the president, hooking up wires
nobody's saying
into
that.
a telephone.
Nobody's saying
The
that.
fact is, reports have come out for many, many months now that people on the Trump campaign transition team were surveillanced by potentially some intelligence group, whether they were inadvertently swept up, whether the names were unmasked. Chris, you don't know the full answer to that question, and I don't either.
That's a
fine
answer. That's
But
why
if people in the Trump transition were unknowingly surveillanced and illegally unmasked on documents, which is what is being alleged out there, I think it's a big problem, and I think ultimately President Trump is going to be proven correct that this wasn't right.
So,
but I don't know
now my second question: does the president believe that this was a concerted effort by the Obama administration to sweep up this intelligence and to leak it to undercut the Trump presidency?
Well, there's two things there. One, the leaks are apparent. I mean, it's obviously all over the place.
Right.
And I've been on your show before, and I've had people in my office at the highest levels of the intelligence community that volunteered. I didn't do anything wrong. That came into my office, shut my door, and told me that these stories about Russian contacts and collusion were ridiculous. So there are leaks out there that are injuring the president. It's wrong, and people should be prosecuted. Now, as to whether or not, to the first part of your question, that there's some sort of broad conspiracy, there's potentially something very wrong here. But I'm not going to go any further than that, other than to say that I think the documents that the intelligence committees have apparently asked for from all of these different agencies that they're collecting and reviewing will tell the story.
I got one last question for you. Again, quick answer. Does Chairman Nunes coming to the White House and briefing the president before he briefed his own committee, did that undercut his credibility, and does that open the door to an independent investigation?
Well, first of all, it's not for me to answer. It's for Chairman Nunes to answer. But it was his decision he made. We don't calculate the decisions that they make and whether they brief someone or not.
And what
we
do you
would
think
have
about
no
the idea
knowledge
of an independent investigation?
I think we let the House committee do its job and see what they come up with. I mean, and by the way, they're not going to come up with anything. We've already been told. I mean, I have been on the show. I'm not making this stuff up. Every single person that has been briefed by the intelligence community has come back to the sticks and told the press, we have been told that there's no
We should say
truth.
sticks is a
The-
reference to
the cameras,
microphones
there
and
is no
cameras.
truth to the allegation that there is some sort
Okay.
of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia.
Reince, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Better than last time, right?
we
you
were-
didn't
you
call
didn't-
us an
you didn't
enemy
go
of
to
the
ban- you
American
didn't go to
people. It went
bananas this
well.
time.
It's always
All
good
right.
to talk with you.
You bet. Thank
Please
you,
come
Chris.
back.
You bet.